What's up, listeners? We're mixing things up a little today. As you can see, it's just me in this video. James couldn't make it. We had some scheduling conflicts throughout the week, and then he went to the Philadelphia Eagles Super Bowl parade and didn't have enough time to prepare for a show. But he says to tell you he hates dipping out, but I don't blame him for wanting to skip because I promise you he wants to give our listeners the best show possible and to not just wing it. So it'll just be me for the rest of the week. I know that is unfortunate to some of you. I'm sure you guys just tune in for James. Anyway, we said this week we were going to do our podcast a little differently, including having our first guest, who was my college friend and former coworker, Armand Trotto, who I want to say was excellent, and we're looking forward to bringing him back. One of our changes we said would happen, though, was that we would introduce a new segment, which is what this video is, and we're calling it Keeping It Short. Our goal for this segment is to go into more detail on a topic that we necessarily can't fit into our regular hour-long shows, and we hope that these segments last about 15 to 20 minutes. That way we can put out one during the week and then a regular show at some point, and it doesn't take up too much of our time, and it's easier on you guys. Instead of listening to an hour and a half long video, you can listen to an hour long video and then a separate 30-minute one. So in future shows, I will say James will be involved, but as I've said, he couldn't make it to this one. So this week, and keeping it short, our topic is mock drafts. With the Super Bowl wrapped up, it's time to break out the big boards because it is officially NFL draft season. I actually do think it's more fitting that it's just me for this segment because I promise you I love mock drafts way more than James. You can ask him, you can DM him somehow, get in touch with him and ask him, does Shane love mock drafts than you? And I promise you James will say, oh yeah. I think I bug him a little too much on mock drafts. So anyway, I will break down all 32 picks in the first round this segment and give a guess as to which teams I think will draft which players based on which position I think that team needs and which players that I would draft. So it's not necessarily who I think the teams will draft, it's more based on who I would draft. And then with each pick, I'll give a brief explanation. So enough of this introduction, let's get right down to it. With the first pick, the Cleveland Browns, I have drafting quarterback Sam Darnold out of USC. A little bit of background. In the last 2 years, Cleveland has passed on Carson Wentz, Dak Prescott, Mitchell Trubisky, and Deshaun Watson at quarterback. Each of those players has shown that they have potential and the ability to have a long career in the NFL. The Browns can't afford to pass on another quarterback in the draft again. I think Darnold has the highest ceiling of all the quarterbacks in this draft class, and he's the one to draft. Number two, the second pick in the draft, I have the New York Giants taking quarterback Josh Rosen from UCLA. Look, Eli Manning just turned 37 last month and is under contract for just another 2 years. The Giants are in a rare position in this draft. They can either take the best player available, which is what some people think they should do. I certainly know one of my friends thinks they should do that, or they look to the future at quarterback, that is. Although I will say they have a talented roster, and they probably will not be in this position in the draft in the next 2 years while Eli Manning's under contract. In my opinion, drafting a quarterback with this pick is the only way to go. So I have them taking Rosen because I think he is the most polished and NFL ready out of all of the quarterbacks in this draft class. But he has the benefit of, if he gets drafted by the Giants, to sit behind Eli Manning for a year, maybe two, and develop and not have as much pressure on him. And then when Eli Manning's contract is up, he can step in and be the new franchise quarterback. So moving on. With the third pick of the draft, I have the Indianapolis Colts selecting defensive end Bradley Chubb from NC State. I'll be totally honest. I could see Indianapolis going in a lot of different ways with this pick, but the Colts defense was one of the league's worst last year. They upgraded the team secondary last year by drafting DBs with its first two picks, but now the Colts need to find a three-down edge rusher. Chubb is easily the best edge rusher in this draft class, and he's been called one of the best, I'd say top three position players in this draft class. So I think this is easily the pick for the Colts. They can get an edge rusher and really beef up that defense. With the 4th pick, the Cleveland Browns are up again, thanks to a trade with the Houston Texans from last year. And I have them taking running back Saquon Barkley out of Penn State. If it comes to this point and Saquon Barkley's still on the board, this is a no-brainer for Cleveland. Despite having a pretty good offensive line, the Browns actually really struggled to run the ball last year. They need to find a 3-down running back to help take the edge off of the new quarterback if they draft him, and Sam Darnold. Barkley is considered by almost every scout I've seen or I've heard from to be the best player in this draft class. He's a once-in-a-lifetime prospect. I think he's a future All-Pro caliber player. Having him should really bolster Cleveland's run game. All right, with the 5th pick, I have the Denver Broncos taking quarterback Josh Allen out of Wyoming. If I'm being honest, I do think Denver will find a quarterback through free agency. I don't think they'll draft one. But since free agency hasn't started yet, I can't really predict that. So for the time being, I have to go with what I know, and that's that Denver needs a franchise quarterback. And for now, I think they're going to draft one. Or I should say that they have a good chance of drafting one if they don't get one in free agency. But anyway, when I look at Denver's roster, or quarterback group, I should say, Trevor Siemian's not bad, but he's just a backup quarterback. Paxton Lynch is a bust. And you got to take a quarterback early in this draft at some point, but I'm going to go with them taking one at number 5. And Josh Allen is the best quarterback on the board at this point. He might even have the best ceiling, or the highest ceiling, I should say, out of all the quarterbacks in this draft class. He's got that prototypical quarterback look, big body, big arm, reminds me a lot of Ben Roethlisberger. I do think he's the real deal. He will need time to develop, though, which going into Denver wouldn't be a terrible place to do that. They have a guy, Siemian, who can start, but he's not obviously the long-term solution. So he can maybe start for a little bit until Allen becomes available. Moving on. With the 6th pick of the draft, I have the New York Jets selecting cornerback Denzel Ward from Ohio State. I know a few Jets fans, if you guys are listening to this, I know you won't like this pick, but Ward does kind of fill a need and actually is pretty close to the best player available mentality. The Jets did a good job of revamping their secondary last year by selecting safeties Jamal Adams and Marcus May with their first 2 picks. But that's not all that doesn't have, their problem solved. They need to draft a corner at some point. And I know that they do need to really more than revamp the defense, they have to revamp the offense, but there's not really a good offensive player on the board right now with the 3 quarterbacks gone and Saquon Barkley off the board. So I think you just go with best player available and take defense, and Ward is definitely the best player on the board right now. And he does fill a need for the Jets. They could use a outside corner, so I think it works out. With the 7th pick of the draft, I have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers selecting safety, corner, defensive back, whatever you want to call him, Minkah Fitzpatrick from Alabama. Tampa Bay's defense was one of the worst in the NFL last year statistically. They allowed 261 yards per game, which was dead last. I should say 261 passing yards per game, which was dead last. 7.8 yards per attempt and an average and a passer rating of 94.6. They need to find a way to bolster that secondary, and especially since the NFC has the better quarterback play of the 2 conferences. And especially in the NFC South division, because Tampa Bay has to face Matt Ryan, Cam Newton, and Jameis Winston 6 times a year. So, like I said, they have to upgrade that secondary. Fitzpatrick is easily the best DB in this draft class. I think he's more of a safety, which is why I don't have him going before Denzel Ward, because the Jets didn't need a safety, but the Buccaneers could use one. But he's the best DB in this draft class, and he, I think, is the 2nd best player in this draft behind Saquon Barkley. So I think Tampa Bay would be getting a steal at number 7, to be honest. With the 8th pick of the draft, I have the Chicago Bears taking offensive guard Quentin Nelson from Notre Dame. A lot of people might be surprised by this. I think A lot of people will assume they're going to take a wide receiver or a pass catcher with this pick, but they could. But when I look at Chicago, I see two really good guards in Josh Sitton, excuse my language, accidentally, Josh Sitton and Kyle Long. But the Bears do lack depth in the interior of the offensive line outside of those two. And Sitton is turning 32 this year, so he's getting up there in age. Plus, getting Trubisky some help along the offensive line could really help with his development by keeping him upright. And adding some help in the interior of the offensive line would really help bolster a good run game to a great run game with Jordan Howard. And Nelson is probably the best offensive line prospect in this draft, even though he's a guard. Usually guards don't go early in this draft or in a draft, but this is an exception. He was a unanimous All-American last year in college, and he's easily considered one of the top 3 or 5 best players in this draft. So I think that's who Chicago needs to get. Oakland with the 9th pick. By the way, the 9th and 10th pick are still to be determined, I should mention. Oakland and San Francisco will have a coin flip in the combine in a few weeks. So for now, I just went by alphabetical order and gave Oakland the 9th pick and San Francisco the 10th pick. So just a heads up, that's not the official order. That's just the way I did it. So anyway, with the 9th pick, I have the Oakland Raiders selecting linebacker Roquan Smith out of Georgia. Oakland had a terrible defense last year. It ranked in the bottom half of the NFL in almost every single statistical category. Needless to say, they need help almost everywhere on that defense. But one of the biggest needs is middle linebacker. And Roquan Smith is probably the best middle linebacker in this draft. He has ascended, is that even a word? He has been ascending up the boards the last few months. He balled out in the college football playoff and national championship. He will be the first middle linebacker taken off the board because of his athleticism, in my opinion. And I think he would really help bolster the Raiders' defense. With the 10th pick, San Francisco just signed I didn't even say who they picked. San Francisco 49ers. I have selecting wide receiver Calvin Ridley out of Alabama. So now I'll get into my reasoning. San Francisco this week just signed Jimmy Garoppolo to a long-term contract. So that means he's going to be there for a while. And they do not have enough playmakers around him to win games. So they have to find him a pass catcher, several pass catchers, I think, this offseason, maybe a running back to help out Carlos Hyde. But adding a wide receiver like Ridley will go a long way. He's a versatile wide receiver. He can be a vertical threat. He can make plays behind the line of scrimmage, with a jet sweep. He can do slants. Best wide receiver in this draft class by a mile. And I think he could do great things with Jimmy Garoppolo. With the 11th pick, I have the Miami Dolphins selecting linebacker Tremaine Edmunds out of Virginia Tech. This is a guy who has really ascended up the draft board the last few weeks. And has been talk that Miami will go with a quarterback, but I think they should go with defense with this pick. Mainly because the Dolphins linebacker unit has been a problem the last few years. Lawrence Timmons is aging. Stephon Anthony hasn't panned out. And Raekwon McMillan, they haven't really seen what he can do yet because they drafted him last year and he got hurt. So they haven't seen what he can do, but I think he will be a pretty good player. But adding a guy like Edmonds will give them 3 really good starters, or 3 really good starting linebackers defensively. Assuming McMillan pans out, you got Kiko Alonso, Raekwon McMillan, 2 players who are pretty good, and then you add Tremaine Edmunds, who can be a really good outside linebacker, who can bring pressure off the edge and make plays, cover space. I think he'd be a really great addition for Miami. With the 12th pick, I have the Cincinnati Bengals selecting offensive tackle Connor Williams from Texas. The offensive line has been atrocious in Cincinnati for a few years, but especially last year after the team let left tackle Andrew Whitworth walk in free agency. But here's a note. Andy Dalton has been sacked 80 times the last 2 years. It's time to get him a quality offensive tackle. They're not getting it done. He's getting beat up. The run game is terrible. They have to find somebody to give him a good tackle to block his blind side. And Connor Williams is considered the best offensive tackle in this draft class and definitely the best pass protector. I think I saw a stat last year. He had given up 1 sack in 2 years. He can take care of himself on the edge. He's going to be a great addition for any team that drafts him. With the 13th pick, I have the Washington Redskins selecting safety Derwin James from Florida State. Even though Washington had a pretty good pass defense last year, ranking number 9 in the NFL in passing yards allowed per game, safety is still an area of need for the Redskins. I think James would be a great addition for the Redskins. He has room for improvement in coverage, but he's an athletic, big body safety that's going to make a lot of plays against the run. I think he'd really help in the back end of Washington's defense. With the 14th pick, I have my Green Bay Packers selecting cornerback Josh Jackson from Iowa. So, new Green Bay defensive coordinator Mike Pettin has a track record of assembling excellent pass defenses. So I think adding another outside cornerback this offseason should be a priority for the Packers. They drafted Kevin King last year, who had flashes as a rookie. He got hurt, didn't play a whole lot, but he looked good when he was healthy and in the game last year. And Demarius Randall, he made a complete 180 from 2016, I should say, to 2017. So he had a really good year, but I think having Kevin King and Josh Jackson on the outside and moving Demarius Randall to the slot cornerback, which is his natural position in my opinion, I think that'll go a long way to giving Green Bay a better pass defense because they already have a really good safety in Ha Clinton Dix. Get some corners. For the love of God, cover somebody, Green Bay. Jackson is considered the second best cornerback in this class right now. They said if he runs a good 40 at the combine, if he runs like a 4.4 40 at the combine, he's going to shoot up the boards and will be the first cornerback taken. That's how good his tape is. So moving on, I'm going to get a drink real first. With the 15th pick, I have the Arizona Cardinals selecting quarterback Baker Mayfield from Oklahoma. This is about where I think Mayfield's going to go. I don't think he'll be a top 10 quarterback, but I do think he will fall somewhere in the top 20. So Carson Palmer retired last month, and Arizona now doesn't have a quarterback on roster for 2018. I expect the Cardinals will try to get somebody during free agency, but it'll probably be a bridge quarterback like a Tyrod Taylor, A.J. McCarron, somebody who is capable of being a starter but isn't your long-term solution. And then they will draft someone early in this draft. First, second round. I think the Cardinals will definitely take a quarterback during one of those 2 rounds. And Mayfield is the best quarterback on the board at this point. There are some red flags with Mayfield. He's drawing comparisons to Johnny Manziel because he doesn't have great size, doesn't have a great arm, but I disagree with that. Not from his traits. He is small. He doesn't have a great arm, but I do not think he's anything like Johnny Manziel. I think he's a hell of a lot more mature, and I do think he wants to win. And going to a place like Arizona, I think will really help him. They have developed a really good front office. They have a talented roster and pretty good weapons offensively to help his development. Larry Fitzgerald, David Johnson, decent offensive line. It's not great. I'm forgetting. They have a couple of good other receivers. I can't think of their names off the bat. But I think Arizona is the best place for him. Baltimore Ravens, with the 16th pick, I have taking running back Darius Geis from LSU. Baltimore could go with a wide receiver, but general manager Ozzie Newsome hasn't been able to find a good wide receiver in the draft. They've had to deal with signing them in free agency. And Baltimore ranked in the bottom half of the league in rushing yards per game the last 2 years before this year. So I think they need to find another. Alex Collins had a big year last year, but who knows if he's going to be the future answer as a team's starting running back. In my opinion, Geis is a talented 3-down running back that's going to have a long career in the NFL as a starter. I think he could really help bolster Baltimore's run game. So at the 17th pick, we're halfway through, guys, and I'm already at 20 minutes, so I apologize for that. But I'm going to keep going, obviously. I'm going to try to keep it a little bit shorter this time. With the 17th pick, I have the Los Angeles Chargers selecting linebacker Rashaan Evans from Alabama. The Chargers have a really underrated defense. The defensive front is really good. The secondary is really good. But the weakness is in the second level. Denzel Perryman is a pretty good linebacker when healthy, but the rest of the unit lacks playmakers. Evans is the kind of player the Chargers need. He's a speedy linebacker with a nose for the ball that is going to be able to cover space, and he will make plays all over the field. With the 18th pick, I have the Seattle Seahawks drafting offensive tackle Mike McGlinchey from Notre Dame. I feel like a broken record, but I've said the same thing in the last few years. Seattle desperately needs to find some help along the offensive line. I have this number. Russell Wilson has been sacked 214 times since 2013. If he wasn't so good at escaping pressure, that number would be a lot higher. McGlinchey was an All-American last year in college, who I think going to a place like Seattle where they already have left tackle Duane Brown, proven veteran, he can step in and be the right tackle, and that'll give him two really good bookends in Brown and McGlinchey. So I think that would really help Seattle. With the 19th pick, I have the Dallas Cowboys selecting defensive tackle Maurice Hurst from Michigan. With this pick, I could see Dallas drafting an edge rusher since DeMarcus Lawrence is about to be a free agent. However, the Cowboys could use some help in the interior of the defensive line to take some attention away from David Irving. Hurst is a little undersized for an interior defensive lineman, but he has incredible strength and should be able to apply pressure from the interior. With the 20th pick, I have the Detroit Lions selecting edge rusher Harold Landry from Boston College. In my opinion, when the Lions have been really good, it's because they've had a good defensive line, and they just don't have a good pass rusher anymore. And their best pass rusher, Ziggy Ansah, is about to be a free agent this offseason. Even if the Lions are able to re-sign him, I think they still have to find an edge rusher early in this draft. They play in a division with Aaron Rodgers, and if Mitchell Trubisky ends up being a really good player, they're going to have to face him twice a year too. So when you're playing guys like that who can escape pressure, you have to be able to get after the quarterback, and the Lions can't do that right now. Landry is the second best, edge rusher in this draft class behind Bradley Chubb. I think he could create a lot of problems at the next level. He's got a quick twitch, but he does need some developing, but that's easily fixable. With the 21st pick, I have the Buffalo Bills selecting center Billy Price from Ohio State. Tough luck for Buffalo here. They need a quarterback, but there's not one at the board at this time, and there's likely not going to be one at this point in the draft. So, in my opinion, after starting center Eric Wood suffered a career-ending, I think it was a neck injury, I think Buffalo's highest priority now becomes getting a center to replace him, to replace Wood, that is. And Price is the best. In my opinion, he's the best center in this draft class. He was nasty in college, All-American, won the Remington Award. I think he'd make an excellent replacement for Wood. Sticking with the Buffalo Bills at pick number 22 from the Kansas City Chiefs, I have the Bills taking defensive lineman Daron Payne from Alabama. Again, there's no quarterback to draft at this point, so I feel like Buffalo is gonna go to the other side of the ball to beef up the interior of the defensive line. Because the Bills traded away Marcel Darius last year, and Kyle Williams will be 35 this year. Adolphus Washington is pretty good, but that unit could use some depth right now, and Payne is the best option on the board. With the 23rd pick, I have the Los Angeles Rams selecting cornerback Isaiah Oliver from Colorado. This is mostly because Trumaine Johnson and Lamarcus Lattimore. Shoot, I messed that up. Let me start over. This is the reason why I have the Rams taking Isaiah Oliver is because Trumaine Johnson and LaMarcus Joyner are set to be free agents this offseason. I think adding some cornerback depth is going to be a priority for the Rams this offseason, especially if both of those guys leave. If both of those guys leave, they're going to take a corner in the first round. If one of them comes back, they might wait a little bit later in the draft to take a corner, but it's going to be a need eventually. And Oliver is the typical NFL cornerback that front offices want today. He's fast, he's lengthy, he's got good size. I think he can be a lockdown corner at the next level. With the 24th pick in the draft, I have the Carolina Panthers selecting edge rusher Marcus Davenport from Texas San Antonio. I can't get it right today, guys. I'm sorry. So edge rusher has been a need for Carolina the last few years, and Julius Peppers, who just turned 38 last month, won't play much longer. He's been an ageless wonder, but he will quit playing eventually. And the Panthers already have a pretty good defense, but they need an edge rusher. That's the one thing missing from this defense, from being pretty good to one of the league's best. Davenport has picked up a lot of height. He was at the Senior Bowl. He's got a really big body, good tape, and scouts are considering him a first-round pick. So I think that's edge rusher has to be on Carolina's mind. So I think they're going to go with Davenport because I think he's best coming off a even front defensive line, which is what Carolina has. With the 25th pick, I have the Tennessee Titans selecting edge rusher Sam Hubbard from Ohio State. Tennessee's defense wasn't awful last year, and it actually has a pretty underrated secondary, but the Titans have to find a pass rush. It was evident in the playoff game against New England. They could not get to Tom Brady. And they were mediocre in sack numbers last year, number 18 in the league. Hubbard has excellent size. He's long. He passes the eyeball test. He has a very high motor. I think he'd make it a great addition in Tennessee's defense. Coming off the edge, I think that'll really go a long way with helping their defense. With the 26th pick, I have the Atlanta Falcons taking offensive guard Isaiah Wynn from Georgia. If there's a weakness with Atlanta's offense, it's in the interior of the offensive line. Atlanta's run game was decent last year. It was number 13 in yards per game. That's, top half of the league. But with a running back rotation that consists of Devontae Freeman and Tevin Coleman, that number should be a lot higher. That tells me that there's a problem in the interior of the offensive line. So I think adding a guy like Wynn will go a long way to helping that. He was a fierce run blocker in college and helped pave the way for two 1,000-yard rushers at Georgia last year. If Atlanta added him, that'll really help, I think, establish the run and get Freeman and Coleman more touches and more yards. With the 27th pick, I have the New Orleans Saints taking defensive lineman Vita Vea, I think is how you pronounce his name, from Washington. Look, New Orleans defense surprised everybody and made an incredible stride last year. They have a really good secondary, but the front seven is kind of meh. They got a decent pass rush, but the interior defensive line and the linebackers really need improvement in the offseason. They were mediocre stopping the run last year, just 16th in the league in rushing yards allowed. They got to get better if they're going to be one of the best defenses in the league. And adding a run stopper like Vea to pair with Sheldon Rankins in the interior, I think will do that. He's like 6'5", 340 pounds. He's going to plug up some holes and absorb some blocks and get other guys to make the tackles. So I think that'll really help with the Saints. With the 28th pick, I have the Pittsburgh Steelers selecting linebacker Malik Jefferson from Texas. This is mostly because of Ryan Shazier's injury. He had a gruesome spinal contusion in the regular season, and it's uncertain if he'll be the same player if he even returns. If he can't return, I don't think the inside linebackers on Pittsburgh's roster are good enough to pick up his mantle. So adding a guy like Jefferson, I think, will be perfect for Pittsburgh because he is athletic enough to be a 3-4 inside linebacker, and he's going to make a lot of plays against the run. He can cover some space. He has to get a little bit better in coverage, but he's pretty good right now. I think he'd make a great addition for Pittsburgh. All right, I'm down to my last 4 picks, so bear with me here. This is way longer than I wanted it to be. Just bear with me here. With the 29th pick, Jacksonville Jaguars, I have taking wide receiver Cortland Sutton from SMU. Late in the year, Jacksonville's wide receiver core was very mediocre, and Marquise Lee and Allen Robinson are set to be free agents this offseason. With the Jaguars deciding to stick with Blake Bortles as the team's starting quarterback, I think that really puts an emphasis on trying to find pass catchers this offseason. It's hard to tell what they'll do in free agency if they have a little bit of cap room, but Sutton is the best available option at this point in terms of pass catchers. He's a prototypical possession wide receiver. He's got a big body, 6'4", 220 pounds. He'll be able to hold off corners, possess the ball after making the catch, and he can make plays down the field. I think he'll make a great addition in Jacksonville's passing game. With the 30th pick, I have the Minnesota Vikings taking offensive tackle Orlando Brown from Oklahoma. I feel like I'm in the minority, but I think Minnesota's offensive line really overperformed last year, allowing just 27 sacks. But I still think the unit needs upgrading. And one of the biggest knocks against Orlando Brown is that he's probably too big for the offensive line. He's 6'8", 340 pounds. So it's just kind of hard to tell where he'll play along the offensive line, but I think it's easily left tackle. With that frame, he's going to be a left tackle. He's going to be able to stop defensive linemen. I'm just not sure anybody. If he can develop, I'm not sure anyone's going to be able to get by him from the left side. With the 31st pick, I have the New England Patriots taking edge rusher Arden Key from LSU. Listen, I think that Super Bowl proved that New England needs a lot more help defensively. They need to find more playmakers. Philadelphia's offense lit them up. They punted one time all night. They have to find more playmakers, especially in the front seven. That front seven was very mediocre. They have no pass rush whatsoever. So I think going with a guy like Key will go a long way. Similar to Hubbard, Key is long, he's lengthy, he's got a quick twitch, he's plenty athletic enough to get around blocks. He's the type of guy I think the Patriots need defensively. All right, and lastly, I have the Philadelphia Eagles taking offensive tackle Colton Miller from UCLA. So on paper, there's not really an immediate need for Philadelphia, but I do think the biggest need for the Eagles this offseason will be to find a talented young left tackle to develop behind Jason Peters. Peters just turned 36 last month. His contract is up in 2 years, and he's coming off a torn ACL from last year. And I should say he torn ACL and MCL from last year. So I really think Philadelphia needs to make an emphasis to get a young offensive tackle to develop behind him. And he'll be in the perfect situation. He'll get to a guy like Miller. He's got similar to Orlando Brown, he's got the perfect frame for a left tackle. He's 6'8", 310 pounds. He's going to be hard to beat coming off the edge if you're a defensive lineman. And he can come in. He won't expect it to be the starting left tackle right off the bat. He can develop behind Peters for another year or two. Learn from a 6-time All-Pro left tackle in Peters. So I really think that'll benefit him. All right, guys, that is it for our very first installment of Keeping It Short. I obviously did not keep it short this week. I'm running close to 33 minutes right now. Some of that was because of the introduction, which we will not have in future segments like this. But hope you guys enjoyed it. We will have, or I should say I will have, a regular show posted later this week. Again, it'll just be me. But like I said, hope you guys enjoyed this first installment of Keeping It Short. This is something an idea that we really liked. We hope you guys like it too. And in the future, I promise you, we will do a better job of keeping it short. I did not do that today, and now I know how long these mock drafts take. So enjoy the rest of your day, and keep tuning in for our podcast. Thanks.